All right, so today we're diving into the U.S. housing market,
Yeah,
which seems to be on everyone's minds these days.
absolutely.
I'm seeing it everywhere in the news, and
Yeah.
especially from this giant stack of articles and data that you sent over.
Oh, yeah.
So it seems like we're trying to get to the bottom of this big question.
Mm-hmm.
You know, are we headed for another crash like we saw back in 2006?
Right.
Or is this time around different?
It's the question everyone's asking right now. And I think to get to the bottom of it, we really need to understand both the historical context and the current forces that are
Right.
shaping the market.
And some of this data is pretty wild.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
seeing home prices that are reportedly double their historical average.
Yeah.
Some cities are already showing some signs of a downturn, and there's even whispers of, you know,
Yeah.
billionaire investors driving up prices.
Mm-hmm.
So,
It's a lot to unpack.
yeah. So let's unpack all of this.
Yeah. A good place to start, I think, is with this idea of a housing bubble. What actually is a bubble? What are we even talking about?
Right.
And I think there's a few key things to look for.
Okay.
The first thing is you're going to see prices shooting up way faster than, incomes or other economic indicators.
Right.
It's like this disconnect between the value of the houses and what people can actually afford.
So it sounds like we might be seeing that now.
Yeah.
Home prices are soaring.
Yeah,
Wages haven't kept pace.
exactly. The second sign is speculation.
Okay.
And this is when people buy houses, not because they need to live in them, but because they think they can flip them later on and sell them for a big profit.
So it's more about making money than actually finding a place to live.
Exactly. And then the third thing is usually excessive leverage,
Okay.
meaning people are borrowing a lot of money to buy these houses,
Mhm.
which increases the risk if prices start to drop because they could end up owing more than the house is actually worth.
Oh, wow.
So those are like the three big hallmarks.
Right.
And so the question is, are those present in the market today?
Well, one analyst who's really sounding the alarm bells is Nick Gurley.
Okay.
He's the CEO of Reventure Consulting.
Mm-hmm.
And his data suggests that home prices are currently 100% higher than their 130-year average.
Wow.
And he's saying that the only other time we've seen such a spike was right before the 2006 crash.
Wow. So his data is really attention grabbing, and that historical comparison
Yeah.
is worrying for sure.
Yeah, and he's arguing that a big part of this price surge is due to speculation,
Right.
particularly from home builders and investors
Hmm.
who have been snapping up properties over the past few years and driving those prices up, way beyond what most people can afford.
Right.
So it sounds like he's saying that there's a kind of artificial inflation happening
Yeah.
where the prices don't actually reflect the value of the homes.
Yeah, that's the essence of his argument. He's saying that speculation is creating this disconnect between
Right.
price and value.
Okay.
And Gurley is particularly focused on certain markets in the South,
Yeah.
like Florida and Texas, as being, most vulnerable to this
Yeah.
potential crash.
And we actually have some data, from those areas.
Okay.
For example, in Florida, the number of new homes for sale has skyrocketed to almost 300,000,
Wow.
which is even higher than the peak we saw back in 2006.
That's incredible.
I know. And then we're seeing similar trends in Texas as well.
Okay.
With inventory surging and prices starting to drop in cities like Dallas, Houston, Fort Worth.
So it's important to remember the context here. During the pandemic,
Yeah.
we saw this massive migration to these states.
Right.
And people were drawn to the warmer weather, what they perceived as a lower cost of living.
Right.
And all these buyers coming in, many with cash on hand,
Yeah.
really fueled these intense bidding wars that pushed prices up
Right.
to these really unsustainable levels.
So it's almost like the pandemic and this unique set of circumstances it created
Yeah.
kind of played a role in maybe inflating this potential bubble.
It's definitely a factor to consider for sure. The pandemic era migration patterns definitely had an impact on these markets. But,
All right.
while Gurley's data and analysis are compelling, it's important to note that not everyone agrees with his assessment.
Right. And we actually have another perspective here from Laura Escobar,
Okay.
who's the president of Lennar Mortgage.
Mhm.
And her focus seems to be more on this growing affordability crisis.
Okay.
Even if there isn't like a full-blown bubble burst.
Right.
She's warning that homeownership is becoming increasingly out of reach for many people
Yeah.
and is urging policymakers to take action.
Her point is crucial because even if we don't see a dramatic crash like in 2006,
Right.
the fact that so many people are being priced out of the housing market is a serious problem
Yeah.
and has far-reaching consequences.
So this affordability crisis isn't just a housing issue.
Right.
It's an economic and social issue as well.
Absolutely. When home ownership becomes unattainable for a large segment of the population, it can impact everything, consumer spending, economic growth, social mobility, wealth inequality.
That's a sobering thought. So we've got these potential warning signs of a bubble.
Yeah.
This growing affordability crisis that's impacting families and the economy as a whole.
Right.
So where do we go from here?
Well, this brings us to a really interesting perspective from Charles Marone, who's the founder of Strong Towns. He has some pretty strong opinions about the role of the government and the Federal Reserve in all of this.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's Marone's take?
He argues that, instead of making housing more affordable, the government and the Fed have actually contributed to the problem.
Okay.
He believes that they've prioritized treating houses as financial investments rather than places for people to actually live.
Right.
So this is what he calls the financialization of housing.
So instead of focusing on policies that actually help people find affordable homes,
the
system is set up to benefit investors.
Yeah.
And just drive up prices.
That's his central argument. And to support this claim, he points to this 2016 report from the Philadelphia Fed.
Okay.
That revealed some pretty shocking information about something called occupancy fraud.
Occupancy fraud? I've never even heard of that. What is that?
It's essentially when investors lie about intending to live in a property to get better loan terms.
Oh, wow.
So they might say they're going to be owner-occupants to secure lower interest rates and other benefits that are designed for people who are actually going to live in the homes.
So they're gaming the system to get an advantage over, regular home buyers?
Yeah.
That seems pretty unfair.
It is, and what's even more troubling is that this report suggests that this type of fraud is widespread.
Wow.
And has gone largely unchecked by regulators.
Wait, so they know this is happening?
Yeah.
But they're not doing anything to stop it?
That seems to be the case.
Wow.
And Marone argues that this lack of oversight has allowed wealthy investors to purchase millions of properties.
Oh, my God.
Often leaving them vacant, which further exacerbates the affordability crisis.
So while everyday families are struggling to buy their first home, investors are taking advantage of loopholes and hoarding properties.
That's what Marone believes, and he doesn't stop there. He goes on to claim that the government and regulators actually have little incentive to crack down on this fraud.
Okay.
He cites a Wall Street Journal report which found that banks often sell these loans to the government.
Okay.
So they're not really concerned with verifying the borrower's information.
So it's like a classic case of passing the buck.
Yeah.
The banks make a profit and then the taxpayer is left holding the bag if things go wrong.
That's essentially Marone's point. He argues that this entire system is rigged against the average homebuyer. And contributes to this cycle of unaffordability.
It's a pretty bleak picture he's painting. So we've got this potential bubble and affordability crisis, a system that seems to favor investors over regular people. What can be done to address this situation?
Well, that's the question many are asking, and it doesn't seem like there are easy answers. Even Jerome Powell, who's the chairman of the Federal Reserve, seems to be acknowledging the limitations of what can be done.
Really, the Fed, the institution that's supposed to have a handle on the economy, is admitting they're powerless in this situation.
Back in September, Powell said that the housing market is essentially frozen.
Frozen.
What he means is that we're in this sort of stalemate. Investors who bought properties at low interest rates don't want to sell and lock in higher rates if they buy something new.
So they're just holding on to their properties, waiting to see what happens.
Exactly. But on the other side, you have families and smaller property owners who are feeling the pressure and having to lower their asking prices to sell their homes.
So you've got these two opposing forces creating this gridlock in the market.
Precisely. And Powell's statement seemed to suggest that there's not much the Fed can do to break this deadlock.
So is he saying that the Fed lacks the tools to intervene? Or is there something else at play here?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Some critics like Marone would argue that the Fed is simply unwilling to disrupt the status quo. Even if it means allowing a bubble to burst. They might be concerned about the potential consequences of their actions. Like triggering a recession.
So it's a catch-22. If they intervene, they risk causing economic turmoil. But if they do nothing, the bubble could continue to grow, leading to a potentially even worse crash down the road.
It's a difficult situation, and there are no easy answers. It really highlights the complexity of the housing market and how interconnected it is with the broader economy.
Yeah, it feels like we're walking this tightrope here. One misstep and the whole system can come crashing down.
There's definitely a sense of uncertainty in the air, and I think it's important to acknowledge that anxiety a lot of people are feeling right now about the housing market.
Absolutely, and so much of this feels like it's outside of our individual control.
Yeah.
But let's try to focus on what we can control.
Yeah.
What are some steps that people can take to protect themselves if this bubble does burst, or even if the market just continues to fluctuate?
Well, first of all, don't panic.
Okay.
Market cycles are a natural part of economics.
Right.
Prices go up, prices come down.
Right.
The key is to make informed decisions based on your own individual needs and goals, not on, fear or speculation.
So it's not necessarily time to run for the hills or anything.
No, exactly. If you're in a stable financial situation, your home meets your needs and you're not planning on selling anytime soon. There's no need to make any drastic moves.
That's reassuring to hear.
Yeah.
But what if you were thinking about buying a house right now?
Yeah.
Is it better to kind of wait things out or?
Again, it really depends on your individual circumstances. If you're financially secure, have a solid down payment, and are planning to stay in the home for the long term,
Right.
buying a house can still make sense.
So it's more about having that long-term perspective and not trying to time the market perfectly.
Right. Don't let the fear of missing out or the fear of a crash drive your decisions. Do your research, be patient, and work with a trusted real estate professional who has your best interests at heart.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to get caught up in the headlines and think that, whatever's happening nationally applies everywhere.
Right.
But real estate's very much a local market.
That's a crucial point. What's happening in Florida might be completely different from what's happening in California or even in your own town or city.
Right.
Pay attention to those local trends, talk to local experts, and make decisions that make sense for your specific situation.
Well, this deep dive has been eye-opening, to say the least.
Yeah.
We've uncovered some pretty concerning information about the potential for another housing bubble and the systemic issues that are kind of fueling this affordability crisis.
It's a complex issue, and there's no magic bullet to fix it.
Right.
But I think the key takeaway here is that knowledge is power. The more we understand about the forces at play, the better equipped we are to navigate this, challenging landscape.
Absolutely. So to our listener, as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with this thought. If you're feeling overwhelmed or uncertain about the housing market, remember to do your research. Seek out expert advice and make informed decisions that align with your own personal circumstances and goals.
And don't let fear dictate your choices. By staying informed, thinking critically, and making strategic decisions, you can weather any storm the housing market might throw your way.
Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and as always, keep diving deep.